Krishna. Need a door closer. That one's gone bad. It's on my to-do list. Changing the door closure. It's on my list. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivanadhari Janavallabha Girivanadhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivanadhari Vallabha Girivanadhari Yasodanandana Vrajagana Ranjana Nana Vrajagana Ranjana Yasodanandana Vrajagana Ranjana Nana Vrajagana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivanadhari Janavallabha Girivanadhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivanadhari Janavallabha Girivanadhari Yasodanandana Ranjana Ranjana Vrajagana Ranjana Yasodanandana Vrajagana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Bhagavacharya Tatarya His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Gauda Vaishnavinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Sakoshi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Ki ISKCON founder Srila Prabhupada ki. Shishi Radha Krishna Go Gopinath. Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan ki. Vrindavan Dham ki. Mayapur Dham ki. Navadvip Dham ki. Jamuna Maya ki. Ganga Maya ki. Tulsi Devi ki. Bhakta Devi ki. Shishi Radha Golokananda ki. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki. Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevayam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevayam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevayam. So today we're reading from the 10th canto, chapter 47, text number 6. Is that right? That's what I was told. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anyeshvi Artha Krita Maitri Anyesh Varta Krita Maitri Yadvad Artha Vidambanam Yavad Artha Vidambanam Pumbi Shrishu Krita Yadvat Pumbi Shrishtu Krita Yadvat Samanasvi Iva Satpadai Sumanasviva Satpadivi Anyeshvarta Krita Maitri Yadva Artha Vidambanam Bumbi Shrishtu Krita Yadvat Sumanam Sviva Satpadaya. Okay. Anyeshvata Krita Maitri Yadva Artha Vidambanam Pumbi Shrishtu Krita Yadvat Sumanashviya Satparayi. Anyeshvarta Krita Maitri Yadva Artha Vidambanam Pumbi Shrishtu Krita Yadvat Sumanashviya Satparahi. All right. Aveshya Sardamati. Pumbi Shrishtu Krita Yadvat Supat Krita Maitri Yadvat Artha Vidambanam Pumbi Shrishtu Krita Yadvat Yeshvarta Krita Maitri Yata Artha Vidambanam. Vishvishtu Krita Yadvat Sumanishvajra Pada. Anybody? Want to try it? Yata Artha Vidambanam Vishvishtu Krita Yadvat Sumanishva Anyesu, toward others. Artha, for some motivation. Krita, manifested. Maitri, friendship. Yavat, for as long. Artha, as one is fulfilling his motive. So the same word there, but it's a little bit different. But that's also one of the, artha, karma, moksha, if people want sense gratification. So it's kind of used slightly a little bit different. Vidambanam, pretense. Pumbi, by men. Shrishtu, for women. Krita, shown. Yadvat, as much. Sumanasu, for flowers. Eva, as. Sat Vadaita, by bees. Translation. The friendship shown towards others, those who are not family members, is motivated by personal interest. And thus, it is a pretense that lasts only until one's purpose is fulfilled. Such friendship is just like the interests men take in women, or bees and flowers. So this is the gopis speaking here. This is the, okay, so please repeat. The friendship shown towards others, those who are not family members, is motivated by personal interests. And thus, it is a pretense that lasts only until one's purpose is fulfilled. Such friendship is just like the interest men take in women or bees and flowers. Tajmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So just one really quick note here before I read the purport. It's like there's a difference between, of course, the family, because there's obligation in this culture to their forefathers. So that there's the obligation. So there's not necessarily something that self-interest. It's something you're obligated to do. You owe so much to your parents, and even in society today, there's very little bit of it left, but it's still, it's a historical thing. Due to some Pinda, even Lord Chaitanya traveled, as opposed to everything else, to the degree of 99.9% by everybody, is self-interest, and we'll kind of get into this a little bit. So purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains here that attractive women, like flowers, possess beauty, fragrance, tenderness, charm, and so on. And as bees drink only once of a flower's nectar and then leave it for another, fickle men abandon beautiful and devoted women to pursue their pleasures. This tendency is condemned here by the gopis, who gave their hearts completely to Sri Krishna. The gopis wanted only to exhibit their charms for Lord Krishna's pleasure. And in the pain of separation, they questioned his motives of his friendship with them. So we just described some of the charms and this will come out a little bit, that women possess. These are the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. Both Lord Krishna and the gopis are completely liberated souls engaged in spiritual loving affairs. By contrast, our so-called loving affairs, being perverted reflections of the perfect loving relationships in the spiritual world, are polluted with lust, greed, pride, and so on. Like all liberated souls, the gopis, and certainly Lord Krishna himself, are eternally free of these lower qualities. And their intense loving affairs are motivated exclusively by unalloyed devotion. So I'm going to read Vishwanath and Jiva. They're not that long, but we'll read those. Because Harinanda got that, his commentary basically is based on Vishwanath, and you'll hear that as I read. Because he has no use for mother, father, brother, or anyone, he should not have possessiveness of them. But because he has a use for women, since he is lusty, he should be remembering you all the more. This is a quote here, but I don't know where he's quoting it from, because it doesn't say. This verse, friendship with those other than parents is motivated. Without those motives, the relationships do not exist. Thus, they should be condemned. Those who make friendship, those are the object of friendship, and those who assist in bringing about friendship are all to be condemned because of the selfish motivation. There is friendship where there is motive, and there is no friendship where there is no motive. The friendship of a man with a woman is the same. The relationship of a man with a woman who, like a flower, possesses beauty, fragrance, softness, and sweetness, and even with steady heart is condemned. So with the gopis are talking about their charms, and those are listed again that they want to share with Krishna. These are their natures they want to have only for Krishna. It is like the bee making friendship with the flower. The bee drinking once the honey from the flower, endowed with so many good qualities, gives up the flower and goes elsewhere in the same way. The man gives up a woman after enjoying her, though she is worthy of enjoyment, endowed with good qualities, and is faithful. In this case, there is motivation, but no friendship at all. That relationship is considered even more despicable. So Jiva Goswami, making friends with others is self-motivated for one's own purposes, not like the relationship with relatives, which is natural. One would pretend to be a friend until one's goals are fulfilled. Men's relationship with women, just like bees with flowers, until their goal is fulfilled. The flower is like a person with a good mind, having no fault, but out of greed, the bee comes. So, and Sanat Goswami is just basically the same as Jiva Goswami. So, as we just mentioned, there's this motivation. Everybody is self-motivated. And this is actually taught, and we're going to get into this a little bit more. And the story that illustrates that the most in the Srimad Bhagavatam is the end of the story of Brahma Muhurta, where Brahma offers his prayers to Krishna after he realizes he messed up. He manipulated something for his self-interest. He wanted to test Krishna away. He wanted to do something. And Sukadeva Goswami brings us out, starting from text 50 to the rest of that chapter. 10 texts, he illustrates this at the end of the Brahma's prayers. So, we have here is a general description of men and especially young men, and their motivated desires, especially with high levels of testosterone. They take this self-interest to a whole new level. But the other side of this is if there wasn't there to a degree, and we're talking about there should be regulation in people's activities. It should be regulated. There should be a civilized society. Of course, now we can see what an uncivilized society is. So, but if men didn't have this high levels of testosterone, there wouldn't even be a population. Because there would be no motivation, right? So there lies the motivation within that. So it's animal life. All animals possess it. That way, there's procreation going on, at a very regular level. Now the gopis are describing Krishna, and it's completely spiritual. They're wanting to have a particular relationship with him, and that whole relationship is basically spiritual. This is not like the mundane, they're not like giving themselves to everybody. There's no this description of flowers, and these bees keep coming. Of course, in society today, it appears to be a little bit more like that. And so that basically they're expressing their love to Krishna. And they're also trying to get a little bit of a read on Uddhava, because he's there. How does Krishna feel about us, right? So they're trying to figure this out. Is he just like one of these men who just takes nectar from a flower and goes and never comes back? So this is trying to get a better understanding, But this whole mood of separation is as a test. It's a final test, because we're reading about what's happened 5,000 years ago in Vrindavan, in Krishna's relationship. And to quantify it, I don't know what number, but a lot of these gopis were sadhakas. They were just like us. But they're on the brink of perfection, because they was able to take birth in this universe at a particular time where they could get the association of Krishna. They made it that far. I mean, this is the ultimate success. Getting to Vaikuntha is a success. Getting to Vaikuntha, or Mayavadis think that merging is a form of success. But those who want to have a relationship with Krishna, which is extremely rare, extremely difficult, but it's actually made easy by the acharyas. It's rarely achieved. 1 out of 1,000 Kali Yugas in a day, once in a day of Brahma. So there's no question of Krishna, abandoning these residents. These gopis were protected by Krishna. He had already eliminated all the demons that were there previously, and they were completely under the protection. So there's no question of them being taken advantage of. And at the same time, their love for Krishna was so strong. They were completely absorbed in him, even in this mood of separation. And this is extremely important, especially for those that were sadhakas, because ultimately there has to be a certain level of trust for Krishna to give himself to us. I mean, if you had like $1 million in a bank account and you allow somebody to be a signer on that bank account, you'd have to have a reasonable amount of trust in that person. But for Krishna to give himself to his devotee, he turned his life over to them, because he becomes to them, their dearest friend. And they hold his love in their hands and in their heart. And to mistreat that, there has to be a certain level of trust that we have to achieve in order to be brought into that circle of devotion, that level of bhakti and that level of devotion. So we understand that these are Krishna's pastimes, and that these actually pastimes strengthen the level of love that these gopis have. This is what's going on. So their love is there, but it's ever increasing at this time. So, of course, Krishna, he's on this planet at the time, spends like around 125 years. He leaves when he's around less than 15 years, he's gone. He's gone out of Vrindavan. But actually, he goes back a lot. He's not that he ever goes back for 120, because after he kills the last demons, this is the Gopal Champu, he kills the last few demons, then Dwarka Krishna goes back to Dwarka, Vasudeva Krishna, and then Krishna goes back to Vrindavan. And in that place, it says, Jiva Goswami describes at the end that then he takes all those devotees back to Vrindavan. In a sense, they're already there. They're not really gone back. It's just a different dimension that changes, because they've already taken birth, they've already grown up, They've assimilated themselves in that environment. They are a part of that Krishna conscious environment, the daily life, that activities that happen in Krishna's Leela. They've already assimilated themselves. They understand Krishna as a childhood. They understand his, growing up as a child. They understand these activities. So it progresses on in Vrindavan. It just seamlessly changes. It's described, Goloka Kumar was going back and forth from Vrindavan to earthly Vrindavan. And it just seemed like it was just a seamless when he did this. You could tell one from the other. When he came and got the mature Brahman, then brought him back, and this happens in a seamless way. So they have this. And then, of course, the Gopal Champu is a story of Krishna's pastimes that these two storytellers are telling about Krishna's babyhood. Because, this like they get around and they get in the groups and they talk about Krishna's childhood pastimes. Of course, in Goloka Vrindavan, Krishna's eternally a cowherd boy. But these references of his childhood are often told. So, ultimately, we have a desire to get there, to want to participate. I'm assuming everybody that are in temples have a certain level of desire. Everybody's different. They develop it at their own pace. But it requires a certain amount of purity to make advancement. And then what is purity? And then how do we get closer to this process, of attaining it? What is purity? Purity is two things. It's always thinking about Krishna and never forgetting him. You're completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness. Nothing else is distracting you. All these obstacles, we discussed that. What is the sadhaka? The definition Vishwanath describes as a sadhaka is one who removes obstacles. Obstacles or we have in the path of our. Now, Srila Prabhupada, in the 8th canto of Adi Lila, there's a lot of information, of course, in all of his books, but it's interesting, some of the things that we're talking about here is that he comments that Krishna has been presented in the West as a woman hunter. And he says that we sometimes have to deal with these misconceptions. He says this in the West. I think primarily in India, it's probably more prevalent than here in America. Not a whole lot of people know about Krishna. I think I mentioned one time before, I was probably about 10 years ago, I was at Weaver Street in Hillsborough. And I was just walking, through the grocery store, and then I heard off to the side somebody say, what's this about Krishna getting involved with a married woman, Radharani? It's just like out of the blue, and I turn and look, and it's like the butcher behind the meat market. He's got, it's all these tattoos, and so you just confront it, see? So Prabhupada says sometimes we have to deal with these misconceptions, So you try to explain, this is Leela, that these are eternal associates. This is an environment created by Krishna so that he can enjoy to the highest level, and that so those who want to enjoy with him can also reciprocate at the highest level. And not just in that platform, in Madhurya, but, as Krishna's parents, as his friend, differently, even his Sanchara, like the trees and flowers and stuff in there are all in a neutral platform. So Prabhupada also says in this 8th chapter, he says that unless one is favored by Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda, there is no need to go to Vrindavan. For unless one's mind is purified, he cannot see Vrindavan, even if he goes there. Actually, going to Vrindavan involves taking shelter of the 6 Goswamis by reading Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Vidagdha Madhava, Lalita Madhava, and the other books they have given. So in order to really understand where these gopis are coming from, we have to purify ourselves. This entire Srimad Bhagavatam, this whole Rasa Lila, everything, it requires that we understand. We have to purify our senses, purify our consciousness, and that's a progression that we take. And the more we purify it, the better we can relate and understand what they're saying. And of course, it also requires a lot of detachment. This process is a process of detachment. Removing these obstacles. Removing obstacles are things that we're attached to, and we get rid of them so we can make progress, so we can continue our progress. So in another place, these are different quotes in the different chapter of Adi Lita. So Prabhupada states, in order to understand Srimad Bhagavatam, right, one needs to read and understand Chaitanya Bhagavat. It's very important. Then one can actually understand devotional service. By reading this book, one can very easily understand this science. And there's a method to really understanding why we should read these books, like especially CC and Chaitanya Bhagavat, Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, right? So another place, Srila Prabhupada states that if one could read the original CC in Bengali, he will relish increasing ecstasy in devotional service. You know, so I read this, and then I read it again, and then I read it again, you know, these books, and CC primarily, and then you read it again, and you read it, and you still, you know, don't know anything. But you keep reading it. You keep reading it. You try to get something, Krishna to reveal something. So, I mean, what could be lost in translation? If Prabhupada said you could relish it even more if you read it in Bengali, what could be missing in that process? So, Prabhupada wanted us to immerse ourselves in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, because through that process, we can actually understand the gopis. That's what he's saying here. In those books, there's a culture that Lord Chaitanya, a Bengali culture, that Lord Chaitanya was a part of. And that culture, when you read these books, you learn about the interaction between Lord Chaitanya, his devotees with each other, you know, and it happened in a particular environment. Krishna's in Vrindavan is happening in a particular type of environment. It's not the environment that we find ourselves in this world. In America, in Germany, in Japan, that's not the environment. It happens in Vrindavan, but Prabhupada also said, you know, go in there, you can make spiritual, because of sadhaka, you make advancement. But you see, you're not going to see it when you go there. You have to purify your eyes. You have to have the eyes anointed with love. So devotees want to be closer to Prabhupada, because the closer we get to Prabhupada, the closer we get to Lord Chaitanya, and the closer we get to Lord Chaitanya, the closer we get to Krishna. That's the process. It's not going to happen. Prabhupada said, you're not going to get understand Krishna without understanding Lord Chaitanya. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. That's why the process happens the way it does. Krishna comes, and then later, Lord Chaitanya comes in the same time of Krishna comes. He comes once in 1,000 cycles to help us better understand that. So he wants us to immerse ourselves in that culture. And he wants us to be a part of something. This is what Prabhupada is, the invitation is there for us to become part of not only Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, but that also translates in being part of Krishna's pastimes. So details become important. In the Kanistha level, they're not as important. But as we make advancement, details become more important, because like the fine-tuner on the radio that has static, as you turn the knob a little bit, it becomes a little bit clearer, until you can hear it or see it clearly. So this comes sometimes some fine-tunings. So, and then it's how we dress. If Prabhupada is trying to create and get us to relate in a particular way, it's helpful that if everybody dresses a particular way. There's a method to it. I mean, Prabhupada did not like women to wear pants. He specifically told his female, started with Govinda Dasi, that I don't like these pants. You should either wear a dress or a sari. Because Prabhupada's trying to create an environment, an area where people can come and help them develop their Krishna consciousness, because these little details have a matter. He did not like wear shorts also. Jadharani asked him, you know, these very first devotees, they were asked Prabhupada everything about life, about what they can do, what they couldn't do, what's good, what's conducive for spiritual advancement, and what's not conducive for spiritual advancement. And then they, and in turn, taught it to other people. Because at 5,000 people, Prabhupada can't tell 2,000 or 3,000 people all the time, each one of them, how to dress, it was the early devotees, and continually it happened, Prabhupada continually gave instructions, like in his books. So there's particular standards Prabhupada wanted. Wearing tilak is another thing, because these were reminders. That's all this is. This is reminding us, those who come into the temple. It helps us remind us to become Krishna conscious. As we mentioned, people, they dressed that way because they wanted to be closer to Prabhupada. It was not even a question. Actually, it was questioned. It did be questioned a couple of times. It did come up. But as closer we got to Prabhupada, the closer we got to Lord Chaitanya. The closer we get to Lord Chaitanya, the closer we get to Krishna. So there's a method to the whole thing. Of course, tilak is another one. Sikhs are another thing they help recognize, especially in the community. Of course, people, if we wear tilak to Food Lion, of course, you're going to get a lot of looks. They're not going to understand it. They're going to understand you're part of some probably group here. Some people may think it's just another cult. Some people may think, you get different opinions when they see, when I wear my tilak. So sometimes I don't even remember I got it on, from the morning program. Then I go shopping. And what are these people looking at me? You get these second looks. There's like you look, but then they always get you get the second look. What's that second look? I got my tilak. So it reminds us. This self-interest is a disease. We have to deal with this self-interest. And we have to think not so much in a self-interest way, but what's good for the society. And those who are in management have a huge responsibility. And the number one responsibility of the GBC and the temple presidents is to protect the method of worship left behind by Prabhupada. There are a lot of other responsibilities, a lot of other things they're involved with, but there's nothing more important than protecting that method. And actually we can see that in our society today, who knows what the future is going to be and how management is going to develop. But there are temples now, I know firsthand that there's no Srimad Bhagavatam class every day anymore. Atlanta, the Fisher Mansion, it's like a Sunday program. There's hardly nobody there. In New Orleans, Villeshwar is probably the only person who keeps the Sunday Srimad Bhagavatam class going. If it wasn't for him, there would not be one in New Orleans either, because there's just nobody there. The focus is shifting in some of these temples to the Sunday program, because that's the only time people have to give to the temple. Now, there are places like, Alachua and probably at Los Angeles, where they have so many people. This is never going to be in danger, or even New Vrindavan. It's probably more in danger where there's not. And I bet you, if you go all these places, there are plenty of devotees that live in the area. You'll find devotees, but actively involved in doing this, it's a lot less. So it's there. So this self-interest can have a negative impact when it comes to the environment in these temples. So we have to depend on the acharyas, our spiritual master. Our relationship to our spiritual master, the closer we can get to our guru, means that the closer we get to Srila Prabhupada. Again, the closer we are to Prabhupada, the closer we're going to be with Lord Chaitanya. And the closer we are with Lord Chaitanya, the closer we'll be with Krishna. That's the process. And so everybody has a responsibility in every temple to help create an environment that's conducive for everybody to make spiritual advancement, to remind each other about Krishna. That means that we more often than not talk about Krishna in his pastimes. A lot of these things are considered details, and they are details. But as we move to a Majjhima level, details become more important. In the beginning, these things aren't that important. What you dress in the beginning of one's practice. But you see that there is a point when these things when you want to create an atmosphere, because the senses are all we got to deal with. Our eyes, our ears, and then how we speak. These things are all what we have. So don't know if there's any questions. I would. And so they said a number of things here. We talked about the relationship here with how a polluted consciousness of men are, and I'm going to read from Srimad Bhagavatam until we finish here, because we only got a couple of minutes. Nobody wants to comment or say anything. So let's listen to what Sukadeva Goswami, as a reminder that until we purify ourselves, primarily we're self-motivated by our own personal interests. And oftentimes, especially when someone gets pride, how much, in the material world, there's a saying, the bigger you are, the bigger the fall, the harder the fall. Pride comes before fall. So these things are self-interest that gets one to that level of. Okay, so Sukadeva Goswami said, "O king, for every created being, the dearmost thing is certainly his own self. The dearest of everything else, children, wealth, and so on, is due only to the dearness of the self. My kids, right? Everything's mine. My wife, it's everything related to me. These are, For this reason, O best of kings, the body and soul is self-centered. He is more attached to his own body and self than to his so-called possessions like children, wealth, and home. Indeed, for persons who think the body is a self, O best of kings, those things whose importance lies only in their relationship to the body are never as dear as the body itself. If a person comes to the stage of considering the body mine instead of me, he will certainly not consider the body as dear as his own self. After all, even as the body is growing old and useless, one's desire to continue living remains strong." It's very true. Therefore, it is his own self-interest that the most dear to everybody, every embodied living being, and it is simply for the satisfaction of this self that the whole material creation of moving and non-moving entities exist. Everything is based on this self-centered. Okay, thank you so much. I'll go to see Guru and Gauranga.
Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Taksham Bharavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandar Akom Vikamaniya Vishesha Shobham Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Andani Yasa Sakalen Priya Priti Manti Pasyanti Panti Kayanti Chiram Naganti Ananda Chinmaya
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Samaniti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Guruvani Pacha Nege Visesha Shunyavane Vasachare Satarante Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Krishna Chaitanya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha, Lokinanu Radha, Lokinanu Radha. raga looking on a raga. Hey, rot. Hey, run, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Sri Ragat, hey, Jai Om Vishnupad. Gadadha, Shivasati Gaur, Bhakta, Vrindikajaya, Shishi, Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath, Sayam Kunda, Radha Kunda, Shreya Kairavya Chandrika Vitaranam Vijavadu Jivanam Anandam Mudivardhanam Pratipanam Pranamritasvadanam Sarvatmasnapanam Param Nija Sarva Shakti Vitani Manchasmaranena Kala Ekadrashita Bhakripa Bhagavan Mamapi Granada Peace Unichena Tarari Vasishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Nadanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitamba Jagarisha Kamaye Mama Janmani Janmanishvare Bhavatad Bhakti Radhai Taki Twaye Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Vishame Bhavam Buddha Kripaya Tapapada Pankaja Sita Duli Sadvasam Vichintaya Nayanam Galodashru Daraya Vadanam Gadgara Rudya Gira Pulaka Nichatam Bapukata Tavanama Grahane Bhavishyati Jugaitam Nimishena Chakshusha Pravishaitam Shunyaitam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Vida Hainame Ashlishava Pada Parastumam Matarshanam Marmatam Garotuva Yatadata Baba Datu Lampato Mat Prananatas Tu Seva Naparaha. Victory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, congregational, the holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O Son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen to the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling yourself